I'll never forget the sound of that laughter. It wasn't just laughter, it was a weapon. The kind that cuts so deep you don't even bleed. You just go quiet. It was our annual Morgan family gathering. Warm lights, expensive wine, fake smiles. My mother, Margaret, loved these events. She'd dress us all in matching tones and call it picture-perfect tradition. But the truth? It was her stage and we were her props. That night, she looked straight at me across the table, her voice sweet as poison, and said, "If Claire vanished tomorrow, no one would even notice." The room burst into laughter. My brother Ryan nearly choked on his drink, and my aunt smiled like it was the funniest thing in the world. But I didn't laugh. I just stared at her, and something inside me snapped. In that moment, I stopped being her daughter. I became her mistake. Before I tell you how everything changed that night, if you've ever been hurt by someone you trusted, a parent, a sibling, or anyone who used your silence against you, then stay with me. Because this story is about what happens when silence learns to fight back. And if you believe every broken heart deserves justice, please subscribe, because I tell stories that speak for the quiet ones. The laughter faded, but the echo of her words didn't. It followed me to my room that night. The air smelled like perfume and roasted chicken, but all I could taste was shame. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the mirror. My reflection looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same nose. That thought terrified me, because I never wanted to become her. Everyone in my family saw Margaret Morgan as perfection, elegant, successful, admired by the whole neighborhood. But they didn't see how she used words like knives, how she turned affection into control. If she gave you love, she owned you. And if you resisted, she'd humiliate you until you broke. That night, I didn't cry. I wrote. I opened my journal, the one she didn't know about, and wrote every word she said, every insult she ever made me swallow. For the first time, I didn't write like a victim. I wrote like someone gathering evidence. The next morning, I found Grandpa Henry on the porch, feeding the birds. He was my mother's opposite, quiet, patient, kind. He looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "She's testing you again, isn't she?" I nodded. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small sealed envelope. "Don't open it until you understand why you're opening it," he said. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. Later that day, Mom posted a photo of the family dinner online. Her caption read, "Family is everything. So proud of my beautiful children." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. I stared at that post for a long time, because behind that perfect picture, I was invisible. That night, I sat by the window, listening to the summer wind. For years, I believed my silence was weakness, but now it felt different. It felt like a plan forming, slowly, quietly, but unstoppable. Grandpa Henry's words echoed in my head. There's more than one way to win a war, and that was the moment I decided I wouldn't fight her the way she expected. I'd fight her the way she'd never see coming. The envelope was heavier than I expected, like it carried its own gravity. Grandpa Henry slid it across the porch table with a deliberate calm that made my hands tremble when I picked it up. His eyes, those steady old eyes, didn't flinch. "Not yet," he said again, as if he could hear the questions I hadn't asked. "Not until you know why." Back in my apartment, sunlight fell in a pale band across the floor. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter as if daring me to touch it. I made coffee. I didn't drink and paced until finally I peeled the seal back with both hands and unfolded the papers inside. A last will and testament. My name in a line that felt like thunder. I leave my primary estate and assets to my granddaughter, Claire Morgan. A note from Grandpa was tucked beneath the legal letterhead, his handwriting looping the way it always had. "She'll hate this. Don't let that be the thing that scares you." I read it 3 times, then laughed at myself for feeling like I was holding contraband. For years, I'd believed the world ran on other people's rules, Margaret's rules, and here was evidence that someone had actually wanted a different ending, but the relief didn't last. Where there's inheritance, there's motive. I knew Margaret. She would see this as a threat, a slight, a thing to be snuffed out with charm and outrage. The thought of her strategizing, of that smile fine-tuning into attack, put a cold weight in my stomach. Still, for the first time in my life, I felt something else threading through the fear. Possibility. I decided to be practical. I scanned the will, photographed every page, and uploaded the copies to a secure folder with a password I didn't share with anyone. I wrote the date on a sticky note and stuck it to the edge of my laptop like a talisman. I called my friend Liam, a lawyer I'd known from college who owed me a favor, and asked if he could glance at the documents. He said he'd review them and in the meantime to keep everything backed up. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded ready. Margaret didn't wait long to make her move, but she did it in that way she always did, beautifully staged, public, and with her teeth bared behind a smile. She posted a photograph of the reunion, crystal chandeliers, linen tablecloth, her arm around Ryan, who looked impossibly proud. The caption read, "Family is everything. Grateful for love and loyalty." It was a message crafted to win hearts. The comments poured in like a rehearsal of sympathy. Within 24 hours, Aunt June had posted a vague, moralizing paragraph about elder abuse and opportunists. Uncle David shared it with a commentary about integrity. Ryan reposted both with short defensive lines. Some people will believe anything. The pattern was crystal clear. Create the narrative first, then let people fill in the rest. A message showed up in my inbox from an unfamiliar number that said, "Nice try, Claire. You never did know when to stop." It was anonymous, but I didn't need a signature. The air in my apartment changed, charged, like the split second before a summer storm. My phone buzzed again. A friend at work asking if everything was okay. Someone had forwarded a screenshot of Aunt June's post with a flurry of condemning comments. My coworkers' faces remained polite, but their eyes were quicker to widen now that gossip had given them permission. Instead of reacting, I began to collect. Screenshots of every post, every comment, timestamps, URLs. I saved emails where Margaret had called me ungrateful. I dug out old voicemails and messages, the ones she thought she'd deleted, and archived them. The work felt oddly cleansing, like cataloging evidence for a story I was finally allowed to tell. That night, I sat with the envelope beside me and listened to the house settle. I replayed Grandpa's words in my head. There's more than one way to win a war. The phrase had been a curiosity before. Now it was a strategy. I thought about all the small cruelties that had been tossed at me like confetti, the jokes that were never jokes, the corrective glances that taught me to shrink. I thought about how easily they turned my quiet into guilt. On impulse, I printed a copy of the will and left it in a drawer in my bedside table, under a stack of old journals. I didn't tell anyone yet. Not Ryan, not my father, not even Liam. Secrets, I'd learned, are weapons until they are used. The next morning, my inbox filled with forwarded articles about estates and family disputes. Margaret had sent a private message to my father, full of wounded emphasis and righteous astonishment. He called me later, voice tight. "She's upset," he said, and in that single, tired sentence was the recognition I'd feared and expected. Margaret would fight. I leaned my head against the cool window glass and watched the street below. People hurrying through puddles the night before had left. The city moved on, indifferent to our family's quiet implosion. I took a breath and felt the envelope like a pulse beneath my ribs, a beginning. The fight, I realized, wouldn't be loud. It would be deliberate, patient, and utterly precise, and I was no longer content to be the punchline. The storm didn't begin with shouting. It began with whispers, little comments from people I barely knew. "Hey Claire, are you okay? I saw something online." A coworker I'd always gotten along with stopped making eye contact. My inbox filled with unread messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Then one morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam, my lawyer friend. "Claire, you need to see this." Don't panic. He sent a screenshot, a post from my Aunt June's account. Some people pretend to care for their elders just to take what's not theirs. It's disgusting how low people can go. Below it, Uncle David had commented, "I can't believe what Claire did to her grandfather. He adored her." I felt the world tilt. This wasn't just gossip, it was strategy. My mother's signature kind of warfare. By noon, my brother Ryan had joined in. He wrote something vague enough to sound innocent. Family means honesty. Not everyone understands that. Dozens of people commented, offering support, pity, and prayers. Margaret didn't post anything. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than all of them. That's when I understood. This wasn't random. This was a coordinated smear campaign. That night, I called my father. He sounded exhausted before he even spoke. "Claire, your mother's just upset," he said quietly. "She thinks Henry was manipulated. Maybe if you just talk to her." "Dad," I cut in. "You really believe that?" He hesitated, and in that pause I heard years of surrender. He didn't believe it, but he didn't dare say otherwise. When the call ended, I stared at the reflection of my phone screen in the dark window. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from focus. I started gathering everything. Screenshots of every post, every comment. Audio clips from past conversations with my mother, the ones where she called me ungrateful, weak, or embarrassing. I downloaded old voicemails where she'd switched between fake affection and manipulation in the same breath. Every file went into a hidden folder labeled Family Photos, 19. Only I knew what it really contained. The next morning, my coworker Emily stopped by my desk and whispered, "Claire, is it true? About the money?" I forced a small smile. "No, Emily, but I guess the truth doesn't trend as fast as lies." She looked away, ashamed. That was enough for me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was strategic. 2 nights later, a message appeared from an unknown number. "Keep the house if you want, but the rest of the family won't forgive you. Delete your little collection of files before you regret it." It was Margaret's style, veiled, elegant, cruel. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated me. That night, I sent everything I had, the screenshots, the recordings, even the will, to Liam for safekeeping. Then I created a new folder titled Legacy. In it, I wrote a short note. "If anything happens to me, release everything." It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. Days turned into weeks. The post slowed down, but the damage was done. People in our town whispered, and my mother played her favorite role, the grieving victim of her daughter's betrayal. But while she was busy performing, I was digging. With Liam's help, I uncovered something bigger: unauthorized login attempts on Grandpa Henry's accounts. The IP addresses led back to a familiar home, my uncle's, Margaret's brother. That's when everything connected: the urgency, the lies, the anger over the will. They weren't just trying to protect a reputation. They were trying to hide a crime. I stared at the report on my laptop, the digital proof glowing cold blue in the dark. My mother had always taught me that silence meant weakness. But now silence was my weapon. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I waited. For the right stage, the right audience, the perfect moment when every mask would fall. And when it came, she'd finally understand what it feels like. To be laughed at by the people who once feared you, because I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her mirror, and she was about to see everything she'd ever tried to hide. The invitation arrived like an apology. A soft cream-colored envelope with elegant gold letters. Family dinner. Let's clear the air. Love, Mom. I stared at it for a long time, the irony sinking in. Margaret never invited people to clear the air. She invited them to choke on it. Still, I went. Not because I wanted peace, but because I was ready for war. When I arrived at the house, everything looked perfect, as always. Candles flickered across a polished dining table, crystal glasses sparkled, and the air smelled like roasted rosemary chicken and staged affection. Margaret stood near the fireplace in her pale blue dress, her charm switched on like a spotlight. "Oh, Claire," she said sweetly, "you look tired." "Still, I'm glad you came," I smiled. "You invited me, didn't you?" Across the table, Ryan sat stiffly, scrolling his phone. Uncle David and Aunt June whispered near the wine, exchanging smug glances. My father poured himself a drink, eyes avoiding mine. The picture was perfect, like a painting of a happy family. If you didn't look too close. We ate in strained politeness. Small talk, fake laughter, and the occasional dagger disguised as concern. "So," Aunt June said between bites, "have you found a job yet that doesn't involve, taking advantage of people?" Margaret gave her that rehearsed, "Oh, stop it" laugh. Ryan smirked. I just folded my napkin neatly and looked at my mother. "Actually, I've been organizing Grandpa Henry's documents. It's interesting what you find when you look closely." The table went silent. Margaret's smile twitched. "Oh dear, you're still hung up on that?" she said lightly. "You should let go of the past, Claire." "It's not healthy, I agree," I said softly. "That's why I brought a little closure tonight." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. Ryan looked up, confused. Aunt June frowned. My father froze mid-sip. "These," I said calmly, laying the papers on the table, "are Grandpa's financial records. His will. And these," I tapped another stack, "are digital logs showing unauthorized access attempts to his bank accounts in the weeks before he passed." Margaret's eyes darted to David, then back to me. Her tone hardened. "You're making a very serious accusation." "I'm not making anything," I said. "I'm just showing what's already there." For the first time that night, she lost her smile. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Ryan leaned forward. "Mom, what's she talking about?" "Nothing," Margaret snapped. Then she turned back to me. "You think you can come into my home and—" I cut her off. "You mean Grandpa's home? The one he left to me?" The air thickened. My father set his glass down slowly. Margaret's mask cracked, just for a second, but it was enough. The control she wore like perfume began to fade. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said quietly. "I'm here to stop you." "You've always wanted to destroy this family," she hissed. I met her glare. "No, Mom, I just stopped letting you destroy me." A long silence followed, the kind that feels heavier than words. Then I slid one last paper across the table, a notarized affidavit confirming that the lawyer handling Grandpa's estate was aware of the attempted fraud. You can call it manipulation. You can call it betrayal. But from now on, you can't call it control. Margaret stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Get out." Her voice shook, not from anger but from fear. I stood too, gathered my bag and glanced around the table. Ryan looked torn. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. But for once, the silence belonged to me. At the door, I turned back. "Do you remember what you said, Mom? That if I disappeared, no one would notice?" Her jaw tightened. "Well, now it's your turn to vanish." Then I walked out, not in anger, not in triumph, but in peace. because I didn't need her apology anymore. I already had my closure. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. For the first time in years, I could breathe without permission, and behind me, in that perfect, fragile house, Margaret Morgan's empire of control quietly began to collapse. When I left that night, I didn't look back. The sound of the door closing behind me felt final, like a chapter sealing itself shut. For years I had dreamed about confronting my mother, but I never imagined it would end. Quietly, no screaming, no chaos, just silence. And that silence was louder than anything she could have said. I drove for hours, without music, without thought, just the hum of the tires and the faint ache in my chest. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, dark and peaceful. By sunrise, I crossed the Oregon border. The first place that felt far enough from her to finally breathe. Grandpa Henry's lake house sat tucked between tall pines, surrounded by fog and quiet water. The key turned easily in the lock, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and memory. His old chair still faced the window. His books lined the shelves. Untouched, patient, familiar. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Like he'd left this place not just for me to live in, but to heal in. I unpacked slowly over the next few days. No more phone buzzing, no family group chats, no fake smiles. The silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was peace. A week later, Liam called. His voice carried that tone I knew too well. Half concern, half admiration. "It's done," he said. "The lawyer's office confirmed everything. The investigation's open. Your mother and uncle can't touch the estate." I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash through me. "Thank you," I whispered. He hesitated. "Claire, what she did, it's not your fault. Don't carry her shame." After the call, I walked outside, sat on the porch steps, and watched the lake shimmer under the morning light. For years, I'd carried her words like chains, ungrateful, weak disappointment. But now I realized something simple. Those words only had power when I believed them. And I didn't anymore. Every message she'd ever used to tear me down. I deleted them all. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need them as proof anymore. The truth had already done its job. Weeks passed. The investigation became quiet news back home. Allegations of financial misconduct, they called it. Ryan sent one short text. "I didn't know. I'm sorry, I didn't reply." Not out of bitterness, but because forgiveness doesn't always need an audience. Then one evening, I found an old photograph in Grandpa Henry's drawer. Me as a child. Sitting beside him on the dock, both of us smiling. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "When the water is still, it remembers everything." I understood it now. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is settling into place. The pain, the betrayal, the noise, all of it had been part of something larger. A lesson that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes quietly and walks away. One morning, I sat by the lake with my journal, the same one where I'd once written all her cruel words. This time I wrote something new. She tried to erase me. Instead, I erased the part of me that needed her. I closed the book, let the wind flip through its pages, and smiled. The past wasn't my prison anymore. It was my proof of survival. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in gold, I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa, for teaching me how to win without fighting." I stood up, breathed in the still air, and walked back inside my new life. One without fear, without noise, without her. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who broke you, if you've ever rebuilt yourself from silence, then this story was for you. Please subscribe, because every week I tell stories like this. Stories of survival, justice, and the quiet kind of strength that changes everything.